Our job is to protect the most vulnerable people in our society, including the elderly and the disabled. Our job is to extend and expand Social Security, not cut it or privatize it. The issue that I'd like to touch upon today is Social Security, perhaps the most important federal program in existence, a program of enormous consequence to the 59 million seniors, people with disabilities, and children who are beneficiaries. I know you have heard over and over again that Social Security is going broke, that it won't be there for our kids and grandchildren, that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, that Social Security is contributing to our large deficit and national debt, etc., etc., etc. And you've also heard many Republicans tell us that we need to cut Social Security, raise the retirement age, or maybe even privatize the program. Well, I am happy to tell you that much of what you've heard is simply not true. Despite what many of my Republican colleagues are saying, let's be clear. Social Security is not going broke. Social Security has a $2.8 trillion surplus and, according to the Social Security Administration, can pay out every benefit owed to every eligible American for the next 19 years. That is not a program going broke. Further, Social Security is independently funded by the payroll tax, the 6.2% of your paycheck that you and your employer pay. That means that Social Security does not add one nickel to the deficit. It has its own source of funding. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that the Republicans forgot to pay for added trillions to the deficit and national debt, not Social Security. Now, the truth is that while we do not have a Social Security crisis today, we do have a retirement crisis, and that is a very serious problem. All over this country, millions of Americans, people who have worked their entire lives, are wondering if they will ever be able to retire with any shred of dignity. The sad truth is that, as a result of the collapse of our middle class and declining wages, more than half of older workers between the ages of 55 to 64 have no retirement savings. Imagine that. You're heading to the moment in your life when you're no longer able to work, when you can't earn any income, and you have nothing in the bank. How scary is that? Further, millions of other workers have seen their pensions eliminated or severely cut back. Promises were made to them by their employers, and those promises were not kept. 30 years ago, more than a third of private sector workers had a guaranteed defined benefit pension plan. Today, fewer than 18% do, and that number is shrinking every day. The result is that many of our parents and our grandparents are trying to survive on totally inadequate incomes. Millions of seniors today are trying to make ends meet, buy the medicine they need, buy the food they require, or heat their homes on incomes of $12,000 or $13,000 a year. Frankly, I don't know how they do it. And the truth is that many of them really don't do it. Many of them don't take the medicine that they should. Many of them live in homes that are too cold in the winter. Many of them don't get the nutrition they need in order to stay healthy. That is not how we should treat the seniors of this country, some of the most vulnerable people in the United States. At a time when the average Social Security benefit is just $1,328 a month, and over a third of senior citizens rely on Social Security for virtually all of their income, our job must be to expand benefits, not cut them. Our job is to strengthen Social Security, not weaken it. Let's be clear. Social Security is the most successful government program in our nation's history. Before Social Security was signed into law, nearly half of senior citizens lived in poverty. Today, while much too high, the elderly poverty rate is about 10%. Let me also be clear in stating that one of the great strengths of Social Security is that through good economic times and bad, Social Security has paid every nickel owed to every eligible American on time and without delay. That is an extraordinary accomplishment, and in this unstable economy, something that we should not take for granted. When corporations eliminated defined benefit pension plans over the last 30 years, Social Security was right there paying full benefits. When millions of Americans lost their life savings after Wall Street's greed and recklessness crashed the economy in 2008, Social Security was right there paying full benefits. Although Social Security's finances will remain strong for the next 19 years, I believe Congress must strengthen and expand Social Security for generations to come. Well, how do we do that? The answer is simple. We demand that the wealthiest Americans in this country pay their fair share into the Social Security system. Today, at a time when almost all new income and wealth is going to the top 1%, a billionaire pays the same amount of money into Social Security as someone who makes $118,500 a year. That's because the Social Security payroll tax is capped. If we lift that cap and apply the payroll tax on all income over $250,000 a year, we can do four things. First, we can make sure that Social Security can pay out every benefit owed to every eligible American for the next 50 years. Not 19 years, 50 years. Second, we can expand benefits by an average of $65 a month. Third, we can lift seniors out of poverty by increasing the minimum benefits paid to low-income workers when they retire. Fourth, we can increase cost of living expenses to keep up with the rising cost of healthcare and prescription drugs. Expanding Social Security by making the wealthiest Americans pay more is not only the right thing to do from a moral perspective, it is good economics, and it is what a large majority of the American people want us to do. Our job together is to create an economy which works for all, not just the wealthy and the powerful. Our job is to protect the most vulnerable people in our society, including the elderly and the disabled. Our job is to extend and expand Social Security, not cut it or privatize it. The economic reality for most Americans is pretty clear. For the last 40 years, the American middle class has been disappearing, and more Americans are living in poverty than at almost any point in our nation's history. Today, real median family income is almost $5,000 less than it was in 1999. Today, the typical male worker is making $783 less last year than he did 42 years ago after adjusting for inflation. The typical female worker is making $1,337 less than she did in 2007. Despite the modest gains of the Affordable Care Act, 35 million Americans continue to have no health insurance, and even more are underinsured. And today, embarrassingly, the United States of America has by far the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major industrialized country on earth. And while the middle class continues to disappear, over the last 2 years, just as an example, the wealthiest 15 Americans in this country, 15 people, and that includes Bill Gates, the Koch brothers, Sheldon Adelson, and a bunch of others. These guys have seen their wealth increase by $170 billion. That's just an increase in what they previously had in a 2-year period. To put this in perspective, that increase in wealth for the top 15 Americans is more wealth than is owned by the bottom 40% of our people, and it is double what this country spends on nutrition programs to feed over 40 million Americans. Meanwhile, since 2005, the typical middle-class family has seen its wealth go down by more than 36%, from $130,000 in 2005 to just $81,000 today. We have witnessed an enormous transfer of wealth from the middle class and the poor to multimillionaires and billionaires. Since 1985, the share of our nation's wealth owned by the bottom 90% has plummeted from 36% to just 23%. Now, what does this mean? It means that if the bottom 90%, the vast majority of our people, had simply maintained the same share of wealth they had 30 years ago, they would have over $10 trillion more today than they in fact do have. Now, where did that wealth go? Well, about $8 trillion of it has gone to a tiny sliver of the wealthiest people in our country. Over the past 30 years, the top 1/10 of 1%, not 1%, 1/10 of 1%, has seen its share of our nation's wealth more than double, from 10% to 22%. The very rich are getting incredibly richer, the middle class is disappearing, and the poor are getting poorer. That is the tragic reality of our economy today. This is the Robin Hood principle in reverse. We are taking from the poor and working families and seeing that wealth go to a handful of the richest people in this country. That is wrong, that is unacceptable, and that is not what the American economy should be about. The concentration of wealth at the very top is more than bad economics. It is immoral and it is unsustainable. Instead of growing an economy with good wages, where anyone can unlock their useful potential, we are undermining our middle class, undermining the needs of our kids, undermining the heart of our democracy. Now, if we are serious about reversing income and wealth inequality, what are some of the things that we need to do? First, we have got to make sure that anybody in America who works 40 hours a week is not living in poverty. And that means that over a period of a few years, we have got to increase the minimum wage to a living wage of $15 an hour. Furthermore, we need to make certain that we have pay equity for women workers. Absurd that women continue to make 78 cents on the dollar compared to men. Second of all, we have to put the American people back to work. And that means $1 trillion job program to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, which will result in up to 13 million decent paying jobs. Third, we need a tax system which is fair. And among other things, we need to put a tax on Wall Street speculation so that every American, regardless of income, can go to college tuition free. Now, as many of you know, 7 years ago, the taxpayers of this country, as a result of the greed and recklessness and illegal behavior on Wall Street, our country, our middle class, bailed them out. Well, now it is Wall Street's turn to make sure that they help the middle class of this country and that all of our people, regardless of income, can get to college. In my view, a society in which so many have so little, while so few have so much, is not what the United States of America is supposed to be about. If you agree, please make sure to share this video and the facts in this video with your friends and your neighbors, but also with your Republican co-workers and the Republicans that you know. To my mind, it is a very sad state of affairs that we have too many working class Republicans who continue to vote against their own best interest. And my hope is that by engaging in a good, honest, straightforward dialogue with our Republican friends, we can win them over so that they can help us create a government which works for all of the people and not just the Koch brothers and a handful of billionaires. So once again, thank you very much for listening. and thanks for your help in getting this video out. Take care.